the ratings agency Standard & Poor's reported this week that the big price increases that a lot of people saw this year look like they were going to be a one-time event, and that future years the price increases would be lower. The market sort of seems to be correcting itself according to Standard & Poor's. So, if there weren't repeal looming on the horizon, we might be talking about how this experiment in a new market for health insurance maybe looks like it's starting to work better.
Well, to that exact point, given Mr. Trump's vow to slash and replace Obamacare, does any of this even really matter?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, certainly Trump and the congressional Republican leaders are hell-bent on repealing this law. Not only do they not like it, but they've been promising their core voters for years and years that they were going to do away with this terrible Obamacare. So it's pretty hard to see how they get out of that at this point. However, there are a handful of Republican senators who are publicly expressing their concerns about the approach that leaders in Congress want to take, which is to move very quickly to pass legislation next month, right after Trump gets inaugurated, for him to sign, that will wipe out most of the Affordable Care Act, but leave it in place for up to 4 years while they try and figure out some other way to reform the health care system.
The Urban Institute released a report this month predicting that if the GOP goes ahead with a repeal and delay plan, the number of uninsured in this country would jump by 30 million people, going from 29 million to 59 million without insurance. The report found that 82% of those would be in working families. So if predictions hold true, what are the implications here?
Well, I mean, it's hard to see how you repeal this law and don't witness the uninsured rate spike back up. I mean, we're currently at a historic low almost entirely because of the Affordable Care Act, between the subsidies for private insurance and the expansion of Medicaid for the poorest households in the states that are actually participating in that. It's been effective in that one way, and if you take that away, people are going to lose their insurance. And whatever Republicans may ultimately decide to do about the healthcare system down the line, they're not willing to spend the kind of money the Democrats were to subsidize all that coverage, so it's very difficult for me to see how they could cover the same number of people through whatever mechanism they may choose.
In fairness, in one of his earliest interviews, President-elect Trump said that he'd keep the pre-existing condition situation and allow for children to stay on their parents' insurance until age 26, right? So is that possible?
Well, I mean, I suppose nothing's impossible in public policy, but the problem, especially with the pre-existing conditions part, is that that's the reason why some people's insurance rates went up. In the old days, before the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies could just refuse to cover people who were sick or who had medical histories that, they had cancer or broken bones in their past. So consequently, the people who were the most expensive were kept out of the market, which kept prices lower for everybody else. You can't cover all of those people without something to offset their costs. And in the case of the Affordable Care Act, it's a mix of financial assistance for poor and middle-class families and the mandate that everyone hates to buy insurance, which is there to make sure that people who are currently healthy are paying into the system and not just waiting until they get older and sicker to buy insurance.
So do you think the recent jump in enrollment gives Democrats a little bit of leverage in Congress? In other words, will it be harder for Congress to a program that even more constituents depend upon?
Well, maybe a little bit. And as I mentioned before, between Democrats in the Senate and this handful of Republicans, including the chair of the Health Committee, who are concerned about having this 2, 3, 4-year limbo period where the health insurance companies and consumers don't have any idea what the market will look like in the future, that will cause immediate problems. And the other thing is that, it's a really easy talking point for Democrats because it happens to be mostly true that if you repeal this law, you're going to kick a lot of people off their insurance. And, the Affordable Care Act has never been popular, but Americans generally, when you poll them, don't like the idea of just booting people off their benefits.
Jeffrey, thank you.
My pleasure.